Welcome to Coffee with PSS. My name is Natassia. I'm the owner of Project Support Services, and this is Marco Eacrett, partner of PBK architecture firm. So Marco, tell me a little bit about yourself. How long have you been in the industry, K through 12, and what do you love about your job?
It's a great question. So I graduated college in 1995 from Cal Poly Pomona, go Broncos. And I started right out of my career in public education. And so I worked at a great firm that did a lot of great work. And so I've been fortunate to work with community colleges, K-12 districts since 1995.
What do you love about this industry that's kept you in here versus, let's say, building a new hotel or, bridges and highways? Like, what's kept you in the school sector?
I think for the most part, probably the opportunity to impact kids' lives.
Yeah.
And I think about my own story and where I came from. I was that classic kid who didn't care in high school. In fact, when I went to meet with the guidance counselor in 10th grade, he said, okay, what college do you want to go to? And I said, well, I don't really want to go to college. He said, okay, let's push all these things aside. Let's talk about the classes you can take.
Yeah.
So I filled my schedule up with all kinds of electives. Didn't take any foreign language, didn't take any math, didn't take any biology, physics, chemistry, any of those things. I took the easy classes. and I had an opening for that last class, and we're trying to figure out what to take. And the guidance counselor said, hey, I've heard great things about this drafting class. Maybe you should check it out. And I did. And it was very different. It was, I wasn't a kid who learned well sitting in a seat watching a teacher up there in front of the room. It was a class where I had something in my hands and I drew. And my teacher, my instructor, saw the talent that I had, so encouraged me my senior year to take the next class, which was architecture and drafting too. And I really continued to excel. Yeah. And so again, didn't have any foreign language, didn't have any of the classes for college prep. It wasn't until the last quarter of my semester, the last semester of my senior year, that I decided to go to college. But again, didn't have any of that background. So the one thing that really impacted me was that one teacher, that one instructor who really saw the talent that I had and encouraged me. I thought, wow, education's a huge thing. If I can be involved to help those teachers, help those students, that would be great.
And what's a project that you're really proud of that you've done over your career?
Probably my most favorite project is the science building that I had designed for the Corona-Norco Unified School District. And interesting story. So this is the project where I was in charge of everything. I got to do the programming, the design, the construction documents, and the construction administration.
Wow.
And so I remember in the programming phase, I was going out to the site, looking at everything, checking out the existing architecture, and I saw this teacher walking across campus, and I realized who it was. It was Mrs. Hutton, who was my 7th grade English teacher.
Oh my gosh.
And I was not the greatest child back in 7th grade. So I went up to her and I said, Miss Hutton, I've got to say, I am so sorry for all the grief that I put you through when I was in your class. She didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
I was just some other random kid. But I think it made an impact on her to have a student come back and basically say, hey, I'm sorry for all the things I did. I've learned and I've become a better person. So that particular project was really near and dear to my heart because I was involved in all aspects of the project.
I love hearing that. And then more about PBK. I know PBK came to California, 4 years ago? And then today where PBK's at, can you shed a little bit of light on that?
Sure. Very fortunate to work with a great group of people who really value students and educational facilities. So about 4 years ago, Alex Parslow and myself, we were in the courtship process with PBK, and we went back to meet with the partners. And I tell this story a lot, but there's two professions that have the highest level of ego, right, in all the world, and that's brain surgeons and architects. And so I've worked with enough design architects who have the big egos that want to change the world at the expense of our clients. And so we were having dinner with the partners with PBK, and I sat right next to the design director. His name is Richard Chi, incredible man. And so I thought, okay, let's test the waters here. And I said, Richard, I got to say, I'm so impressed with all the work you've done, all the awards you've won over the years. Expecting him to sit up a little straighter, puff out his chest and say, that's right, look at me.
Yeah.
But he did the opposite. He said, you know what, I've got a great team that works really well together, that values everything we do. Whoa, okay, he must have missed that one.
Yeah.
So I circled back about 30 minutes later with the same question. He had the same response.
Wow.
I thought, you know what, this is somebody I could work with who values the client, the budget, the students more than he does his own ego. And so that was basically the decision was made. So Alex Parcel and myself, we jumped on board and we started this thing with two of us back in January 2016. So here we are in 2019. We've gone from 2 to nearly 150.
Wow.
And 7 offices in California. It's been an incredible journey, but we're so blessed to work with such a great group of people who really value clients and students.
And what kind of culture are you trying to build within PBK? Because nowadays it is about company culture and your vision and your mission. And school districts really are starting to pay attention to that when they're hiring consultants, design professionals of what they are going to bring, yes, to build, but also what they're growing culture-wise within, you know, everything else, the community.
Yeah. I heard a great quote in one of the leadership books I've read recently, and it talked about how you take care of your people, and they take care of your clients, and your clients take care of you.
Yeah.
So the one thing we're really trying to build here is a culture that values people. It's looking at where they're at, what their potential might be, and figuring out what it takes to get them to that potential.
Love that.
And a lot of people don't realize that when you value people and you see what their strengths are and where they could go, it really just invigorates them to put that much more effort to who they are. We talk about a job and a career and a calling. And the goal is to get people up to that point where they see that this is really a calling in their lives.
Right. And I think it is a great calling because the thing is, yes, they're working on projects, but they're really impacting the lives of our future, which are these students. And that's what's kept me in the industry is, yes, we do close out, but I'm helping close out a project that a future project can get built, and that future project's going to help many lives of students, teachers, staffs, and community to help them out. So yes, I totally agree with that.
So we got the principals together and we did kind of this exercise where there's a great book called Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
We read that.
Excellent book, and it really brings you to the point of asking the question, why do you do what you do?
Yep.
And so we went through that exercise. Another great book called The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. He talks about these 6 really important things. And so our principals got together and walked through these 6 important things and came up with kind of a mission statement for what we do. So the principals here in California got together and talked about the guiding principles that we want to drive as we move forward, as we're trying to build this culture. And we put out this really isn't for public consumption, but I'll put it out there anyways. We came up with a guiding principle of how we want to operate. And what we came up was the idea that we exist to elevate educational environments by investing in our people and communities to provide obsessive client service, to maintain existing relationships and cultivate new ones, to lead with innovation and expertise, and to promote and provide mentorship and growth opportunities, not just for our staff, but also for the clients we work with, which is exactly what you're doing here. You're putting out those opportunities for people to learn more. We're seeing a lot of baby boomers start to retire out of this industry. A lot of people coming up that just don't have the experience. And so we're looking to be experts in the field to provide our clients with that experience, that expertise, just as you're doing here. This is an incredible thing that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Great growth opportunity for anybody who wants to learn.
Right. So now I want to dig into the local bonds and the state bond. Now in 2018, many districts went for local bond and passed, which was amazing. And then we have 2020 coming up and 2022. What is it that you would like to share with our community about either the local or state bond? And then last but not least, I want to talk about too is how districts can prepare for a local bond. Like what tips you could give those districts?
Sure, great question. So going back to 2016, the governor at that time, Governor Brown, he was approached and said, Governor, we really need money for educational facilities. Will you approve this bond and put it on the ballot? And he basically said, I probably shouldn't say any of this, but I'll say that.
Go ahead.
He kind of vacillated about whether or not he would approve it. And at the very last second, he decided not to. So there was no bond on the ballot in 2016. So the CASH organization, Coalition for Adequate School Housing, they said, you know what, we're not going to rely on the governor in 2018. We're going to get the signatures and put that ballot on the bond ourselves to make sure that we can pass it. So the CASH organization was really the driving force behind the 2018 bond, which got approved. So a lot of people don't understand that okay, the state has this money, why can't we get some of that money for ourselves? And what it comes down to is it's a combination of state funding as well as local funding. But you can't capture that state funding unless you can match the dollars with local funding. So the majority of the time it requires a local general obligation bond to capture those dollars from the state. So in 2018, a lot of school districts went forward with the bond, their own local bonds,
Right.
in order to capture that. There's still money in the coffers at the state level trying to spend the last bond, and we've realized that's not enough. The money ran out very, very quickly. In fact, we're projecting if this bond does pass in 2020, there's going to be a very short window to capture that money. That money could be gone within a year, at least allocated for. So fast forward to 2020, the bond that looks to be on the ballot is about $13 billion. And so of that, $3 billion is dedicated to community colleges. $5.4 billion is dedicated to modernization. 2.7 dedicated to new construction. And they've got a breakdown of a lot of different things, including CTE, charter schools, joint use, preschool. And they're creating this new category called 75-year-old buildings. So we've got a lot of buildings in the state that are over 75 years old, and it's just a drop in the bucket in terms of the state funding, what it does. So they're saying, hey, we're going to elevate the eligibility for buildings that old to bring them up to standard. There's also a water and lead component as well. And one thing that we've seen over the years is the state kicks in 60% of the value for modernization, which means the district's got to come up with 40%. But that total number, in terms of the need, is probably about 25 to 30% of what the actual need is. So when districts capture that money from the state, move forward with those projects, the need is still way, way up here compared to what they could do.
Right.
And so this bond in 2020 is really going to help us get to a higher level of those facility needs.
When you're going to these school sites and school districts, what is it you're seeing that they need the most? Is it modernization, new construction, or a combo of both depending on the school district?
So definitely more modernization. With the declining enrollment we're seeing throughout the state, the majority of school districts have an excess of facilities. There is some new construction, but not as much as we've seen in the past.
Right.
What we are seeing a lot of districts doing is taking out modular buildings and replacing them with new buildings, which is a huge advantage. One thing we're also seeing is the districts that do have the bonds and they're wanting to spread their money across the district, there seems to be a strategy. If you've got $100 million, do you spread that evenly across 30 schools, or do you say, you know what, we're going to focus on 6, 7, 8 schools, do those the way they need to be done, and put the money into those. I was doing the math with a group yesterday about if you spread things out, you might have $40,000 per classroom to do the work.
Wow.
Okay, well, furniture in and of itself could be about $20,000. So, okay, now you can do carpet, you can do painting, and you might be able to do a little casework and maybe some marker boards on the walls. By that time, you're done. When really, you should be just exploding that classroom, creating a flexible learning environment,
Right.
changing out the lighting, maybe replacing the windows. There's a lot of work that needs to occur that you can't do at $40,000 when you spread that money across the whole district.
Yeah.
But if you can capture a couple of schools or a handful of schools and really do what you want to do, it's going to make a bigger impact and show the community this is what we can do with the money.
And then when you're showing what you can do with the money and building the projects per, what you said you're going to build them to, how have you seen in the past where districts gain that trust in the community, and then they keep voting for a local bond to pass because they say, okay, the district's gonna build this, and they kept their word, and we've seen the outcome. And then we also seen the outcome of districts, they don't keep their word, they don't build the projects they said they were gonna build, and then the community's like, I'm not voting on a local bond anymore.
Right.
So what have you seen with that, of just with great planning? Because it all comes down to planning.
Absolutely.
It really does. Yeah.
So one thing we've seen is the district needs to be really intentional about the projects that move forward at the very beginning of the bond cycle. And when we did modernizations back in the 1990s, we were putting things in like fiber optic cabling, replacing air conditioning. We were doing electrical upgrades. All of these things that you don't see from the curbside.
Yeah.
So there was no curb appeal. And so what the districts realized in the next round of projects is, okay, we need to do something that really props up the schools from the community's point of view.
Right.
Simple things, marquees, painting projects, replacing, or I don't know, whatever. But doing other projects that the community can see from the front door, as well as work within the classrooms. So parents, as they're going into the classrooms and experiencing this with their kids, they want to be able to see what's going on as well.
Right.
And when you've got these dingy old classrooms with bad lighting, and you can change that out, it really shows the impact that's going on.
What is it about track and field projects that the community votes for and says, yes, there's going to be a new football field, a new track and field? And I feel like every district, when they go for a local bond, they make sure to put that in because they feel that the community will vote more of a yes if they see new track and field versus new classrooms where their kids are going to be in the room majority of the time. Yeah.
That's a great point. And what we've seen is just the surgeons of understanding that athletic fields are indeed classrooms.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I go back to in my childhood when I was in school is I wasn't involved in all those things. Had I been involved in sports, I might have taken a different course. And so we're seeing with the extension of the classroom to the outdoors, it makes a huge difference to kids and kids' lives. And so those tracks and fields and stadiums and new athletic facilities really make a difference on campuses. And they're a lot faster to build as well. So we worked with the local district a number of years ago. That was the first thing they did, and it made a huge difference. Otherwise, if you're trying to plan all these things out, it could take 3, 4, 5 years to construct these things.
Right.
And they're like, well, we passed this bond 5 years ago. What's going on? But those track and fields get done pretty quickly.
Going for a local bond, what is it that they should start preparing for, planning? I always tell districts, if you're going for a local bond, again, because we're closed out in certification, that's our lane, what we do, what we specialize in, I tell them, start working on it now. Yes. What else are you telling these districts, preparing them for planning?
That's probably the most important thing, is understanding what's going to hold you back from moving these things forward.
Right.
Again, when you pass a local bond, the community is expecting to see movement and movement quickly. Worked on a project a number of years ago where we're renovating this existing library building. It was built in the 1960s, had an addition in the 1970s, another addition in the 1990s.
Wow.
They had 3 open A numbers. So we submitted our drawings, and DSA said, yeah, this is great, but we're not going to approve this until you deal with these 3 A numbers. And these were legacy projects that had issues that were beyond our control. There was paperwork from an inspector of record who had passed away a decade ago. And so DSA has provisions for getting those things approved, but it took us over a year to get all that paperwork in place. A year.
Wow.
In that period of time, the plans had expired. So DSA made us start from scratch and resubmit and re-review everything.
Wow.
And so it was by closing those projects out that allowed us to finally move forward. So that project got put on hold for over a year.
Wow. And so like where we were at 2013-14, there was 26,000 non-certified projects. And as you can say, you pick the low-hanging fruit. And where we're at today, there's about 7,000, I think Doug Humphrey said with DSALA, but they're the high-hanging fruit. These are the projects that have revisions not approved, change orders outstanding, the projects were not built per plan, the inspector pretty much, I want to call them cowboys at times, built the project how he thought, and again, not per plan. So where we're at today is these difficult projects, but for you as an architecture firm, when you're coming into these districts, and are you still seeing these type of projects that are affecting your work or could affect your work?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Those are still issues. And the district, by being proactive, hiring firms such as yourself, is really going to set them forward.
Because I feel right now, everyone's thinking, oh, there's only 7,000 left and it's not going to affect my district or project. And we're telling them like, no, these are actually the 7,000 worst ones you could ever deal with. And those type of projects, like you said, can take a year or longer to close out. But besides that, it's also budget. These projects, I kid you not, there's one that cost about $200,000. So when you're trying to close out 50 projects at a district and the total's coming out to, I'm not kidding you, 700,000, and the district only has a certain budget, how does it affect, you know, an architecture firm that's helping with the planning? And I mean, where does that money come from? Because that's what I've always wondered. Where do you get the money to fix stuff that came from the past of local bonds, and now you're pulling from money from the future, which to me, that money needs to be there for those future projects.
Yeah, school districts, they're at a huge deficit at this point in terms of their ability to spend money. And so a lot of them, they can't spend that kind of money. They've got to figure out which campuses, which projects to move forward and just hold on the other ones. One of the things we always recommend to districts is be proactive. Don't wait until you submit your plans to find out you've got a problem. And so tackle it head on. So we brought several districts down to DSA and just had the heart-to-heart. Doug Humphreys has been great. Craig Rush has been great down in San Diego. And we say, look, these are the issues here. And so we're working on closing these projects out in conjunction with these other projects. And what we found is DSA, they want to help you. And if you reach out to them from the beginning, they're going to figure out a way to help you out. But if you ignore them and wait till the very end, that tends to be a bit problematic.
Have you used the new form? I think it's called, it's a Form 91, 92, 93, 94. It's all the same for different offices, but it's a pre-app meeting form. And then you schedule an hour with DSA to talk about these issues. Has your firm been using that?
Absolutely, very helpful to ask those questions in advance.
And what other type of questions are you asking? Because I know besides closeout, it could be a very different thing in that project where you want to go to plan approval and not have a chance of it getting not approved and kicked back. So have those meetings really helped you?
They really have. We talk about accessibility issues. We talk about a strategy to addressing those issues. And what we want to do is get them to buy into that process during the design phase. Last thing we want to do is spend all this time designing something and have them say, no, you got to do all this other stuff as well. Had we known that, we might have picked off some of these things and not done some of these things.
So yeah, that's a thing we're trying to tell districts too, is here are some things you need to be proactive on, even if you're going for a local bond now, because here's what you do not want to do once it passes, and then your architect firms are working on it, and boom, you're hitting a block wall and delayed a year or two because of your project. So
absolutely. I don't know if I talked enough about master planning.
No, shed some light on that, because that's a big deal, right? To me, master planning is either right before they go for a bond or they want to, that you go to the sites, you assess them, and you see what really needs to be done or what they want to do. Which way does that work?
So that might be talking about how we help districts pass local bonds. And so typically we utilize the master planning process to understand what the needs are and engage the community and the campuses to understand their needs. So if architects come in and they prepare a master plan and say, this is it, good luck with it, you don't get that buy-in. But when a district chooses to do some outreach, it really makes a huge difference. So we're working with a particular district down in northern San Diego County, and they have 39 campuses. And so we went down and we had 3 meetings at each campus. We met with the principal to hear what was important to them. We met with the district staff at that campus to understand what was important to them. And we met with the PTA and various parents. So getting a holistic understanding of what was important to the people from a particular site was huge. In addition to that, we met with the district administrative staff to understand what was important to them. And so we take all that and we put it all together to understand what programs need to be pushed forward. And one of the big things that we're seeing today is the idea that curriculum really drives construction.
Yeah.
So I talked earlier about ego with architects. And in days past, we as architects did a disservice to the students that occupy these schools. We design these great, beautiful facilities and we'd say, good luck. You know, they comply with all the requirements of Title V. It's got a 960 square foot classroom. It's got this, that, and the other thing. But it didn't really respond to how instruction was delivered. So we've taken a completely different perspective now. We say, okay, we want to understand what's important to districts, how they deliver curriculum today, but more importantly, how will they deliver curriculum in the future?
Right.
Then how do we take these existing facilities and match them to that delivery? And so we're seeing that's a whole resurgence of buy-in from administrators, from faculty, from staff, to really rethink how we utilize these facilities. Right. And we're seeing that process really allows them to buy into the idea of, okay, we need to somehow raise funds in order to accomplish these things.
And I like how you mention the ego of architects and the buildings, because what I have seen is at times these architecture firms will design these amazing, beautiful buildings, but their M&O team is like, how am I going to manage this? How are we going to keep up with this? We're not trained on the latest technology of the building. And I feel too, there has been, there needs to be a bridge built with the M&O team, because again, you could build a beautiful building, but if you want it to last, the M&O team of the district has to be able to maintain the building.
Absolutely.
So is that something that you guys have done too, is you've met with facilities and M&O and be like, we're gonna build this, but here's how we can maintain it affordably? Because again, if you can't afford this beautiful building, why build it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We used to talk about things like balance, but now I think the correct word is harmony. We need to have harmony amongst all these different groups.
Wow.
So M&O is a great resource. We reach out to them, we talk to them. In the past, sometimes they've driven things where it shouldn't have gone. I had one M&O director tell me, you could paint this school any color you want, as long as it's battleship gray.
That's pretty funny.
And
like,
so
okay.
There's that combination. I was at a board meeting last week where one of the board members was talking about, as they were reviewing all of the designs, there was a lack of color, vibrancy. Hey, we want to see more vibrant designs here. Well, what can we do to make that happen? And so, again, it's a harmony of all of these different things, and that's really the role of the architect, is to bring all of that together, to make sure each of these different groups, constituencies, is heard, is listened to, and their values are brought in to create this design, which benefits the students, not the architect, the maintenance team, or any other group, because the end user is really the most important. And that, again, is why I got into this profession. Because I was that student whose life was changed as a result of an instructor who cared about kids.
Right. And I love that so much. So I also want to know too, are there architect firms that when they're doing the master planning, like you said, here's your master plan, they don't meet with the PTA, they don't meet with the principals, they don't meet with district, faculty and staff, and pretty much what you guys have learned from that is like, no, you need to interview everyone, because then it's a project that just, again, doesn't work. And then what happens later on down the road? You're rebuilding or reinventing these classrooms. Like, what happens? I want to know, like, what's the outcome if you do not do what you're doing? That's what I'm wondering.
I think the key is without that type of involvement, you've got a lack of ownership.
Got it.
And when you don't have ownership, it makes it very difficult to pass those local bonds, because you need the support of everyone. And it's not just the instructors, the administration, you need the support of the community. And so what we see a lot of districts do is they bring in key people from the community into the process, where they really understand what it takes to not pass a bond, but the condition of the facilities
Right.
and where we want to bring things to. And so their involvement to see behind the scenes how the things work really helps I shouldn't say pass the bonds, but it really helps push forward those master plans.
My last question too is, why have you seen a decline in enrollment? I know no one can probably pinpoint it, but what do you think it is of why we're seeing such a decline? Are people moving out of California? Are, this generation of millennials waiting to have children later? I mean, that was something I know that's constantly brought up, is a decline in enrollment.
It's
Charter?
a combination of a lot of things, and I think the two primary ones, as far as I'm understanding it, are the regulations in California are just getting stricter and stricter and stricter. The cost of housing in California just keeps going up.
Yeah.
We did see the drop in the Great Recession, but that certainly has picked back up. So kids are getting out of college today with $150,000 in debt.
Wow.
And so they can't afford to go out on their own. They are waiting longer to have kids. And a lot of them are moving out of state because it's a lot more affordable. You could spend $650,000 to buy a little 1,100 square foot house on a 2,000 square foot lot. Or you can take that money and buy a 3,500 square foot house on 3 acres with a lake in Texas.
Very true.
And so people are weighing their options. Why would I want to stay here and get so little when there's an opportunity over here?
Right. What about modulars and relos? What do you love and what do you hate about relocatable buildings?
Great question. So my wife was a high school math teacher, and she was early in her career. She was at the bottom of the totem pole, so she was way out there in the North 40 in a modular building, and they crammed 38 kids into a modular building.
No.
And it was just insane. It's just too many kids for too small of a space. Even though it's the typical 900 square foot classroom, it was still very compacted.
Wow.
So modular buildings typically are built for the lowest possible dollar, and oftentimes you get what you pay for. And so we've seen a lot of modular buildings, and they're just not the highest quality. And so we just finished a project down in Saddleback Valley where they couldn't afford to replace them all with permanent construction. So we went in there and we modernized them. We changed out the exterior skin, changed out all the interiors, carpet, even the wall paneling, the ceilings with new lighting. You walk in those buildings and you'd swear it's a standard construction building.
Wow.
So modular buildings can be retrofitted to match permanent standards. It just gets to be a little expensive, but it's still cheaper than rebuilding a brand new building.
Right. And then what about relocatables? Our favorite.
Our favorite. So those can be a challenge. Those don't age very well, but we are seeing a lot of great products out there, pre-manufactured units that are shipped out to the site. They're still not necessarily as good as permanent construction, but sometimes they can be. It's all about the natural lighting. It's all about the air conditioning and then the lighting itself. All of those things, if they're done well, they can be acceptable.
Right. So when we're working with districts, our number one thing of closeout is relocatables.
Yes.
And I'm not kidding you. Some districts have them. They purchased them in '88, the year in the '90s. And I'm thinking, why would you want to certify a relocatable building that's that old? It's falling apart, termite damage. I mean, why? That's why I've wondered with districts. I don't get a straight answer at times, but why do districts want to keep these? Is it because they don't have it within their budget to buy?
It's all about the money.
It's all about the money.
They just cannot afford to replace those buildings.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you, Natasha. Very happy to be here today and talk about some very important things.
No, thank you. We learned, such amazing, useful information, and I love everything you've shared because I personally feel everyone is keeping these stories, and they're great stories, and we need to share them in our community. And what other better way than, creating this? I wanted to share your story and PBK's story and share it with the community so they could really see what your company's about, your culture about, what you're about, why you're in this industry. What I love is, since I've been in the industry for 10 years, I see many people come in and many people stay. And there's something special of why they stay. And I think it's because they love, like you said, changing and impacting the lives of the students. So I really appreciate this interview and your time and everything we've learned.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. I really appreciate what you do, your
thank
company.
you.
You've made a huge impact as well in school districts, and thank you for that.
Thank you so much.